Hello, everybody. Welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name's Suj.
And my name is James.
James, today is the People's Poll. And they got two choices yesterday, not three.
I didn't really give them much of a choice. I'll be honest, my Sunday turned out in a certain way where I wasn't really thinking about content. I had Spurs on my mind and thinking, how easy can I go on Ten Hag tomorrow or not? So there were two choices for the People's Poll. I thought it'd be a good time in the sense the 6 game weeks gone. Everyone's played 3 home games, 3 away games. Admittedly, some teams have had easier schedules than others. Well documented. Wolves has been particularly difficult, for example. And I thought it'd just be interesting for us to do something we don't normally do and have a little statistical dive. So I asked the Twitter community if they wanted us to focus on the individuals, i.e. the players, or whether they wanted us to focus on the teams. I did pretty much hint yesterday on the main podcast that people should vote for teams, but of course they didn't because they're way more interested in the individuals. I think the team discussions at this point would have been more interesting personally because we should caveat this clearly and say that 6 games is a very small sample size at this stage. But we are going to have a look at some bits of data, which is taken from FBref. I know that's not everybody's ideal solution for where they take the data from, but I'm not an expert, and that's where I'll take the data from. And we're going to have a look at some few metrics and see what stands out and just have a little bit of a discussion about it, which I guess leads into fantasy stuff without a doubt.
Yes, indeed. So we've got a little look at things like XG, XA versus actuals versus expected, some goalkeeper related stuff and crosses, penalty touch boxes, all sorts of bits and pieces. Not too deep, but we'll whiz through maybe 7 or 8 of these different KPIs, metrics, stats, whatever you want to call them, and see what's interesting and what potentially stands out. Let's start at the back, James. Let's start with the goalkeepers, I think.
Yeah. So for those on YouTube now, we've got graphics up showing from FBref, but we're looking at save percentage here, which I think is an interesting metric to look at. Top performers so far in terms of save percentage, that's Alisson, 84.6%. David Raya is also over 80%. So too is Neto, who's obviously Arsenal's backup goalkeeper now. But that's obviously only 2 games with Bournemouth. And Nick Pope, who's had quite a bit of criticism so far this season, is also on 80%. Right at the other end of the spectrum, Jose Sarr, 42.9% of shots saved. He's only played the 2 games so far. The one that I think stands out the biggest on this is Jordan Pickford, isn't it? 53.1% save percentage so far.
Yeah, very low. Very low, considering the other thing you've got to bear in mind when you look at these stats, though, is how many saves, how many shots on target and how many saves. So David Raya, for example, is 24 saves from 29 shots, whereas Alisson is 11 saves from 13 shots, right? Yep. So you're talking not far off 2.5 times, two and a bit times the volume of shots. Nick Pope, 35 shots on target, 29 saves. So the volume varies massively between some of these players. Obviously, you can discount Neto's and Alex McCarthy's because they're not in the teams anymore. But yeah, Jordan Pickford's save percentage is very low. But I mean, they conceded 4 against you. They've been conceding a lot of goals.
Look, it should lock up a little bit now with Jared Brantwaite obviously back in the team. It's interesting though, isn't it? You know, Pickford's made 17 saves this season, which is the same number as, say, Bernd Leno. But Leno's faced 22 shots on target, whereas Jordan Pickford's faced 32. And I've seen some criticism of him, particularly prior to the weekend, from some Everton fans saying that he's really underperformed, he's not returned well from the Euros. I don't think there's any suggestion that he'd lose his place in the team, but that's an alarming save percentage. I think what do you view here as good? I would say above 75% generally when I look at this would be good.
Yeah, you've got to take it with the quality of shots and volume of shots combined. But yeah, above 75% would be okay. I think the keepers that we'd expect to be up there, I mean, Sanchez done well, Raya, Alisson. Edison's quite low at 72%. But again, 18 shots. 18 shots and 13 saves. So the volume isn't there. Your keeper's not done too badly, 14 from 19.
I wish I could have added Vic's Europa League stats into this. That would have been good after last Thursday night.
My keeper's awful, 14 from 23. but we've had a awful start to the season.
Any concerns on him, Mariola?
No, the irony is that well, look, it's been a shaky start, but he has been one of our best performers for 2 years now. So yeah, no concerns around him.
I think, look, save percentage, as you quite rightly said, doesn't necessarily give us the full picture because we can't see on this what the quality of the shots are, and we are obviously working within a small sample. So this next slide, which shows post shot XG.
Just one thing on the shots.
Go on.
Flecken. Well, when Raya was injured, Flecken was the flavour of the month for the 4.5s. I mean, 30 saves from 39 shots. There's only two goalkeepers that are in the 30s. Hermansen, and 12 of them were the other day when they against Arsenal.
13.
13. So over a third of his, almost half his saves came in that one match.
Well, that's more than Alisson's made this season.
But Flecken's up there with 30 saves. And look, 74.4% is a decent percentage, but to be steaming into Brentford goalkeeper, had I seen those stats and the number of shots on target they're conceding, I might have second guessed that and reconsidered who my goalkeeping choice would have been.
Yeah, I'd say ones that stand out a little bit here is it's more from the team collective rather than individual, but Nottingham Forest only facing 17 shots on target so far this season.
And they've played Liverpool and...
Yeah, whereas look at Aaron Ramsdale is obviously 29 shots on target.
But from 4 games.
But from 4 games, yeah. So you need to add in Alex McCarthy's 9 as well. So Southampton faced 38, which is more than double than Nottingham Forest 17. Yes, I said yesterday that Southampton would decide where my Game Week 7 captaincy would be going, and they definitely decided for me last night, subject to a certain individual not getting injured for Arsenal this evening. This next slide of post-shot expected goals conceded tells us essentially which goalkeepers are overperforming, i.e. against their expected goals conceded. And the interesting thing is the majority of them are. In the first instance, do we read anything into that?
Post-shot expected goals conceded.
So it's the value of the shot after it's taken, basically. So it's not determining basically on, okay, this chance has got an XG of 0.5. It's determining what after the shot is taken, basically the probability of the goalkeeper saving it or not.
Right. So if you had a absolute sitter from 10 yards out, but you're off target, then obviously the post-shot XG on that's going to be rubbish because it's never going to be zero. In the first place. Exactly.
If it's off target, it's 0. So this is literally
you are
weighted
factoring
against
in the quality of the attempt, not just the quality of the opportunity as well. Yep. Correct.
And right at the bottom still sits Jordan Pickford. Underperforming expected goals conceded by 3.5. Couple of others to flag that underperforming at the moment. Emi Martinez, the world class Emi Martinez. Sam Johnson, Areola, Matt Sells actually underperforming. David Raya apparently as well. I don't know how that works. That seems very harsh.
Yeah, I mean there might have been some. He had a few really good saves. A couple in the City game from memory and stuff. He's made a few decent saves. So maybe, but then also, I mean, are the goals that he has conceded very low post-shot XGs as well potentially.
So
I mean, Justin Johnson's, I don't know, that's still going to have a low XG because of the distance, isn't it?
I don't know if maybe
James Justin, not Justin Johnson.
The John Stones one was where the shot is hit. Actually, it's quite low and central, isn't it? But he's lying on the floor.
He's out of position completely.
Yeah. So maybe there's an impact to that. Also, it's a deflective one in terms of James Justin's effort. So I don't know how that's measured then in this in terms of the expectation of the goalkeeper to save that. Does it factor in deflections? I'm not honestly sure what the answer is to that. So probably to flag that one that might not be completely accurate. But there's some different names jump to right towards the top of this in terms of overperformance against expected goals conceded. Hermansen, I think, unsurprisingly, after that performance on Saturday, because it weren't just the volume of saves, there were some very good ones in there as well. And actually, I identified after game week 1 that was quite impressed with him. He gave me kind of Thomas Kaminski vibes in terms of the sort of keeper that would be very capable of making good saves. Onana, who always gets criticised, 2.8 above expected goals conceded so far this season. Can you remember any great saves he's made?
No.
No, me neither, actually. Nick Pope still ranks really well here. There's a few that flips. Dean Henderson actually shows up quite well here, above Allison, just below Guillermo Vicario. Do we take anything from this now in terms of thinking about goalkeepers for fantasy, or does it not matter anymore? Because I think in the past we've always looked at goalkeepers and been like, oh, who keeps save points, but now it just feels like you need the clean sheets to go with it, right? So
Yeah,
do we
I'd be
almost
looking
not
for
look
clean
at this
sheets.
anymore?
No, I mean Leno was doing all right for me at the start of the season because he was picking up the one or two odd save points here and there, but not really. I'm looking for clean sheets, and we know now that bonus for goalkeepers is tough to come by. Maybe unless you're David Raya, who seems to have picked a few up, but
Yeah, but
yeah, it's tough to come by.
I'm not too sure that will last. Remember,
Mm,
two of Raya's kind of big returns with his clean sheets have been away to Villa and away to Tottenham. So I think those are the sort of fixtures the goalkeeper keeps clean sheet. Probably are going to have to make some saves to
yep.
go along with that. He actually made more saves than you'd ordinarily expect playing Wolves in game week 1. So I'm not convinced that with the Raya and the bonus will necessarily last when Arsenal keep clean sheets going into the future. I mean, what did he make at the weekend? Was it one save?
Yep.
So, he wouldn't have been hitting the bonus at the weekend if Arsenal had kept a clean sheet. That's a certainty.
Should we talk about some strikers, James, and shots?
Well, and midfielders in terms of
Yeah,
looking
yeah, true.
at volume.
Well,
So
looking at
Erling Haaland is
forward players, let's say.
Erling Haaland is running at 5 shots per game. That's what he's running at the moment. 30 shots from 6 games played. He's essentially played nearly the full 90 in all of Manchester City's games so far this season. Obviously, 10 goals scored from 30 shots taken. So a conversion rate of 33%. It's very, very good.
His shots on target, James, his accuracy in terms of quality is
20.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
3.34 shots on target per 90. There's not another player. There's only one player who's above 2, and he's only just above 2, and that's Mo Salah. And other than that, there's not another player who's in the 2s for shots on target per 90. He's at 3.34. He's not a player that you normally associate necessarily with volume. Erling Haaland, just because he doesn't have that many. It's always the running joke, right? 10 touches, 2 goals, or what have you. But here, this season, he's got the volume as well as the accuracy. And do you think that's going to continue? That he's still going to have such a high volume of shots on target?
Well, it certainly shouldn't surprise us that he's near the top. It maybe is surprising that he's more than double any other player in the league in terms of shots on target, bar Mo Salah. It's almost a better way to sell it, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just huge.
If you look
And in
at
that time, they've played
if you look
Arsenal,
at
played Chelsea.
if you look at shots on target table, just to give you more of a kind of a breakdown reference of it, Jackson 9, Saka 9, Diaz, Havertz, Bumo, Palmer, Solanke, all 8 shots on target. Salah is 12, Haaland is 20.
Cole Palmer, 8 shots on target. How many goals he scored?
It's on 6, mate.
6 goals.
Six goals from 8 shots
8
on
shots
target.
on target. That's
someone
incredible.
might say that's unsustainable. We'll look at him in a bit more in a set. But just to go back to shots, there's a few players that stand out here, and right near the top of the list. Antoine Semenyo.
Yeah.
You were on my case first thing this morning. What are you doing here? I was like, I'm waiting for FB refs to add the statistics from last night, and this was the main reason why, because I knew we'd want to talk about Semenyo. Antoine Semenyo has only taken 2 shots less than Erling Haaland this season. 28 shots, but only 7 of them on target.
Yeah, I think it's all then down to quality, right? Because obviously he's taking.
He's shooting more from distance. He has more.
I was about to say exactly that.
Anyone who watched the game last night would be like, oh yeah, he has a lot of shots blocked and stuff as well.
Yeah, so understandable, but he was obviously quite popular for a few people on Wildcard, and you can see why now, because he is taking on the mantle.
That's still very big. He's also leaning towards 5 shots per game, which playing for Bournemouth, I mean, it's huge, isn't it? You can see why people have gambled on him in fantasy, can't you? I mean, Southampton at home is enough of a reason, actually. But the data there tells us that this is a player who likes to get his shots away. And things can happen when people take shots. Deflections, all sorts will go down your way. I mean, actually, ironically, he's basically been robbed of an assist last night with Lewis Cook's effort deflecting off of Dango Utara. Eze is 3rd for shots in the league.
Doesn't surprise me at all.
Is this another one where it feels like he's shooting from distance quite a lot? He's at
Yeah, he
25
will.
shots.
He will. But and then obviously maybe that's going to include direct free kicks from around the box and stuff. Then he likes to have a pop from them. It definitely will. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me. But he's a player that is very direct and wants to get shots off. So seeing him up there, no shock.
What would you do if you're an Eze owner at the moment?
Move it on.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think you can look
Move
at
it
that
on.
number and be encouraged, like, oh, third most shots in the league. Like that's
7 on
encouraging,
target.
isn't it?
7 on target, mate. That
I
would
get
have
that,
him
but then
outside the top 10.
it's only kind of Salah and Haaland really clear of him from in terms of shots on target as well, isn't it?
Yeah, but as a percentage, he'd be well low.
Well,
He's at
yeah,
28%. He'd be outside the top
yeah.
15 or 20.
If you look at, let's just look at the top five in terms of the shots or top four shots taken this season. So 66% of Haaland's shots are on target, 63% of Mo Salah's shots are on target, 28% for Eze, 25% for Semenyo.
If I said to you, Eze is going to have 1 shot on target per game, would you be all right with that?
I don't think that's terrible at his price
Well,
bracket, Suj.
when you compare it to other people's shots on target, it's not terrible. You're right, but it is lower than pretty much everybody else in that list.
But then I think at this stage, like whether you've had sort of between 9 and 6 shots on target, is almost kind of like much of a muchness. We're between 1 and 1.5. And again, this sample size is obviously really small. So it only takes one game where you have 3 shots on target, and then you're jumping back to just behind Salah and Haaland at this stage. I mean, to give you an example, to look back at shots on target, right? Dominic Solanke's up to 8. Now, a lot of that's over the last couple of games. And obviously, what's interesting with him is he's only started 4 games. As comparison to the majority of others are at sort of over 5. So Dominic Solanke's played 1.5 games less than Cole Palmer, but had the same amount of shots on target as him. He's played 2 games less than Brian Boomer, same amount of shots on target. Solanke's had more shots on target than Semenyo, who's played the majority of Bournemouth games. And interestingly, just looking at Bournemouth, when you look at this shots on target table, Marcus Tavernier's had the same amount of shots on target as Semenyo, and he's also a player that likes to shoot from distance as well. He's got great technique, Marcus Tavernier, as people will have seen with the assist last night. Ollie Watkins, 7 shots on target. Does it feel low?
Does it feel low? No,
because kind of equivalent 5 games at the moment. Remember them early subs in the first few game weeks.
It was. I kind of disregard the first 2 games of the season. West Ham and Arsenal. That was not Ollie Watkins being Ollie Watkins. That was a shadow of himself. So I kind of look at it as 7 spread over the 4 games since as a lot better.
I think when you look at this one and then compare the shots on target percentage next to them, Semenyo and Eze really stand out, don't they?
Yeah, definitely. On this table, obviously, you can see there's more players that have shots on target in excess of 2 per game. But the majority... So Solanke, Raul Jimenez, you scroll down a bit further, you're looking at Sinistera. None of them have played John Duran. None of them have played more than like 4 games. It's all bits and pieces. Jimenez is the only one that's come close by getting into the team.
With Jimenez, if you block those players who've all had 7 or more shots on target this season, Jimenez has got the best shots on target percentage, actually.
Yeah. By a long way.
Well, again, part of that is penalty box player, isn't it? In terms of where he's going to be having his
same
efforts.
As look at Chris Wood, 7 shots on target, 70%. Where's he going to be shooting? Chris Wood doesn't shoot from outside the box, does he? Doesn't play. He doesn't touch the ball outside the box, does he?
Chris Wood.
Yeah.
I think he did more than Forest fans would have liked at the weekend, but generally speaking, no. You flick-ons maybe, rather than being on the ball so much. Yeah, I mean, very dangerous player in the penalty area, they obviously both are. Does anything stand out from this data other than just looking at Haaland and going, oh my God, what am I doing without him?
Well, look, you're surviving so far, okay, James.
Surviving,
so I don't think that's an issue.
That might get worse over the next few weeks, mate.
It might also not. What about shots per 90, James?
Yeah, a few things stand out. This is more perhaps players who we haven't seen too much of yet, but maybe keep an eye on because
Mm.
the volume's quite high from what they've seen so far. So Jorginho Ruta is over 5.5 shots per 90 on what we've seen so far. Scored at the weekend, obviously at Chelsea. Now, subject to João Pedro's fitness status for forthcoming weeks, he may play more in that position as a 10. So you'd want to keep an eye on that. I think Eddie and
It,
Ketcher.
it's also just 2 shots on target though for Ruta. Like
Yes, from
it's
14
such a
shots. Yeah.
yeah. So that one doesn't interest me. And Ketcher a little bit, I would say.
Yeah, I think with Nketiah as well, he's one where if Mateta was injured, and I know people wanted to gamble him going into game week 4, which I think is quite understandable because Glasner's comments prior to that had very much suggested he'd come into the team. If you knew he was going to play as the 9 though instead of Mateta, I think we'd quickly be asking some questions because he's very good at getting his shots away, nearly 4 shots per 90 so far this season. And one that really stood out here for me, Suj, was Harvey Barnes.
Okay.
Scored 3 goals this season, 14 shots. The shots on target percentage at 35% for a wide player. I think he's okay. He's obviously got the great goal like Wolves in his locker that we saw a couple of weeks ago. He's essentially played, what, 3.5 games so far this season, averaging just under 4 shots per 90 for his minutes on the pitch. That's another one that I think if we regularly thought he was going to play, would be quite interested. Of course, at the moment, with him wide, while Isak's out, Gordon plays through the middle, doesn't he? So
Yeah.
the appeal for Barnes never really shows up. Noni Madueke's data is obviously massively skewed quite a bit by obviously that
The hat
Wolves
trick.
game. Nicholas Jackson shows up pretty good on a lot of these tables, Suj.
Why are you glossing over Brennan Johnson?
Um,
Spurs bias here because I look at that
no,
and
I
I'm
tell
like,
you
you know
why.
what? He
No, I tell you
he
why. I tell you why I'm glossing over Brennan Johnson because I've got a brilliant Brennan Johnson statistic right at the end,
okay
which I
because
which I even messaged you and went, I've got one more, Suj.
he showed up well in the shots on, like 6 shots on target from 4.7 games is not bad at all. So shots per 90 at 3.8. We know that you're a particularly attacking team. With the injuries now, we talked about it on the main pod yesterday. You're talking about he is going to play, right, moving forward. Catch him at the right time, you can do well out of Brendan Johnson. The stats back it up. 6 shots on target, it's not bad. It's not
Well,
it's not
I,
far behind
I mean,
Harvey
look,
Barnes.
if you were looking to, and it's been a kind of a regular question that a few people have been asking this week, Johnson, Madison, Kulusevski, for example, you'd look at this and you'd only go for Johnson if you looked at this specifically. But then you start looking at XA and stuff, and it's going to draw you perhaps towards the other two, for example. So, yeah, there's a really good stat on Johnson that I want to take you through at the end, actually, Suj.
Okay.
Let's look at over and underperformance on non-penalty XG this season. We'll start with overperformance now. Usual caveats here that a player who is as good a finisher as Erling Haaland is nearly always going to overperform his XG, and he is the player who's overperformed his XG by the most this season. He's obviously got like 10 goals from was it 9 goals he's got Haaland? Oh, 9 goals, sorry. One is a penalty, isn't it? So
Yep.
nine non-penalty goals from a non-penalty XG of 5.4 this season. Brian Bumo has been a big overperformer this season. So he's overperformed his non-penalty XG by 3. I think when you look at the finishes for his goals against Tottenham and West Ham, you can understand why that's happened. Because
Yep.
those are where he's striking the ball in terms of his height are probably going to be quite low XG chances. Dwight McNeil scored twice for Everton at the weekend. Big overperformer. His non-penalty XG is only 0.5 so far this season. So he's 2.5 over having scored 3 goals. But don't use that as the complete caveat for Dwight McNeil because we've got something very interesting to show you on him in a
Yeah, Dwight
second.
McNeil shoots outside the box, so
Yeah.
he's gonna perform here, no doubt about it. No
Cole
surprise
Palmer,
on Lewis
Cole
Diaz
Palmer
as well
sits
and
in
Cole
there
Palmer
with
because it's
Diaz. Yeah.
volume, right? They've scored a lot of goals, the two of them this season. Players generally will outperform XG, right?
No, plenty
Okay.
don't. Ask Timo Werner if he
Okay.
overperforms XG, mate.
I mean, people that score volume of goals, James.
The best finishers, Haaland being him
Yeah.
specifically, yeah. I think if you got to the end of the season, Haaland hadn't outperformed his XG, you'd probably be
Hmm.
surprised. Jamie Vardy was always one, wasn't he? As at his peak, he'd be like, I just ignore the XG with Vardy because
Hmm.
he was such a good converter of the big chances. Wasn't a player that regularly missed the best opportunities. So Jamie Vardy was regularly one we used to kind of like push aside in terms of looking at from a data perspective. Some of the ones like Diaz, though, so I think you can look at and think, not sure. Like, is this just a hot streak based on what we'd seen on him historically over the last few years? We should also remember it's new manager, it's a new style. I think it's working towards him, but he didn't really come close at Wolves, for example, at the weekend. But then I couldn't say, oh, he particularly underperformed at the weekend. I can't remember him having a really good opportunity in the game. Liam Delap scored two brilliant goals at the weekend.
Hmm.
He's one that's also well overperforming at the moment. Three goals scored from an XG of one. John Duran should be no surprise just on minutes alone, and he's obviously another player. To go back to the shot volume stuff, if Ollie Watkins got injured, how quick would you want to go there?
Yeah, and he scored couple of really good worldies as well this season. So him outperforming his XG doesn't surprise me.
James Justin appears here. There you go. There's the
Wow.
perfect example of it being a kind of low data sample so far.
Yeah.
Harvey Barnes overperformed. João Pedro on this
Yeah.
list as an overperformer. It always feels more interesting, I think, though, Suj, to look at these and look at those who have underperformed so
Well,
far this
that's where you're
season.
looking at your potential upside of getting players that are due, let's say, as you'd say.
Yes,
Imminent,
yes.
is it returns imminent,
FPL
James?
Scout Joe's goals imminent table, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And, Bruno Fernandes owners, here's your excuse. Right at the top, non-penalty XG, 1.9 underperformance so far this season. It's not scored, has he? No, this
No.
season, Bruno Fernandes. I think they might be appealing the red card, by the way.
Okay.
And I think if they do, there's every chance he'll get off with it.
Okay.
Because I don't think many of us think that's a red card.
No.
Would you have any qualms with that if they overturned it? I wouldn't.
I wouldn't have had any qualms if they'd only given a yellow in the first place. So, yeah, I couldn't then turn around and say, I'm upset if it gets overturned. No.
So Bruno Fernandes, and that's clearly in front. It was interesting that Cameron Archer shows really high on this, despite the fact, obviously, this is non-penalty XG as well, right? So he's had a 2.3 XG this season, non-penalty XG of 1.5.
Hmm.
So he's had some chances, but his minutes are obviously getting limited now. Joshua Xerxes missed a few big ones this season. He's a big underperformer. Dominic Solanke, he's joint third on this list, a 1.4
Yep.
underperformance of XG so far this season. I think he had an XG of about zero point 0.6 at Leicester, game one, and obviously has been well involved in the game since game week 4. So he had good opportunities against Brentford, was an underperformance, and actually at the weekend again, also underperformance. Think about that one-on-one really late in the game as well. So Dom's underperforming expectation at the moment. I think there's a consistent flow you can expect of what's to come with him. Your boy Mickey Antonio's here.
Yeah, and irrelevant from a fantasy point of view. Irrelevant.
Alejandro Garnacho relevant.
Imagine if I said to you three of the top seven on underperforming XG are Man United players. Between them, that's 2.7, 3.7, 4.6 goals.
They're the biggest team underperformer.
So if Manchester United had scored five more goals this season, what's the narrative then around them? Because they've only scored five in total. You're doubling their goal tally all of a sudden.
It depends when those goals were scored, right? Because
Well, of course.
if they were scored against Liverpool and Tottenham, they'd have one more point, wouldn't they? Or unless
Yeah,
they scored four in one of them and one in the other.
yeah. But it's just interesting that they have underperformed their XG. Like if you were a Ten Hag defender, you'd say, well, look, we've underperformed our XG. At least we've created chances. It's just all about spin, James. But it's interesting to see three of their players in the top seven.
Yeah, and interestingly, Eze shows here again. I think he's a hard sell for people because I don't. I've seen people looking, oh, I want to like move Eze to Bowen and stuff, and I get it. Like Eze's playing Liverpool and Bowen's playing Ipswich, but he does feel like one you might sit here this time next week and regret that.
Yep.
Or are we that concerned about Palace?
I just think there's upside elsewhere, James. I don't see Eze going off in any of these games at the moment, so I just think that there's so many other players that are doing well that it's an easy off. And particularly if you want to find money and drop down, he's an easy sell as well.
I don't think there's too many else worth flagging it, but we'll flag some of the bigger name players
What
ones here.
about if we did goal scoring centre back, Milenkovic? He's
Yeah,
got a
but that
1.1.
Milenkovic one, and he probably is the right Forest defender to go and get. But remember, there was a 0.9 chance at Southampton in game week 2. So
Right.
that's and he missed it. So that's what a huge volume of that is. And so, to get your full context here, admittedly, you need to dive in a bit further into things like that. With someone like a Jota, who's 0.9 underperformance so far, that's not on one chance. There's one big one in there I can think of, the header against Ipswich on the opening day, just before he'd scored. But that's an accumulation of more stuff, quite clearly. But yeah, just to throw out a couple of the big names who are just under one underperformance so far. So Jota is one, James Maddison 0.9 under so far. And right at the bottom of this table, we see Saka and Jackson 0.7 under expected so far. Expected assists. I said we'd mention Dwight McNeil again. Suj, he's top.
Yeah, and I'm really surprised.
A lot of that is the set play stuff, isn't it?
Okay,
A lot. Everton create a good volume of stuff from set plays.
corners and yeah,
He's on it, but he's also playing in that 10 position where he can be more creative now and play threaded through balls, a la that pass for Dominic Calvert-Lewin and in the defeat to Bournemouth in game week 3. But yeah, Dwight McNeil, top of the XA numbers. So this is where we said, the XG, okay, it's not looking great, but XA, yeah. An Everton player has been the most creative player in the league, apparently, Suj.
that's really surprising. Madison's no surprise there.
No,
Nor De
and
Bruyne.
James Madison's numbers across certainly the Twitter FPL community were kind of really well highlighted ahead of the Manchester United game in terms of his XGI being really strong so far this season. The thing I just feel with Madders is I don't feel he's going to score enough. I wouldn't be surprised if we get to the end of the season and McNeil has scored more goals than Maddison. I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay. Saka's an interesting one. I mean, he's chipped away with assists so consistently throughout the season. At the start of the season, James, before it started, you'll remember that I had a set Declan Rice in my draft. Part of my argument for Declan Rice was that he takes corners and they score a lot of goals from corners. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think all the goals that Arsenal have scored from corners, both Gabriel's were Saka's corners, Trossard's, which was an own goal, admittedly, in the end with Ndidi, but was a Saka corner. It's actually Saka's corners that he's got half his assists from, which is not surprising because of the quality of his delivery. But I did have Rice down for that. For the corners from the other side.
Saka's only taken 4 more corners than Rice this season.
And he's got assists, 3 assists from corners or 4 assists from corners, whereas
he does
Rice
feel like they've all
none.
been those left-footed ones have been the
Goal
most dangerous,
ones.
it feels
Yeah.
like. In fact,
his delivery's on the money.
In all of the last 3 games, Arsenal have scored from a corner
Saka
from Saka corners, haven't they? And all of them, the Trossard deflected one, the Ndidi own goal at the weekend being one. So yeah, Saka shows up.
It makes that Saka to Palmer move so difficult because he's not doing badly.
Can I be honest? I don't know how people sell Saka this week. He's being sold a lot, and I think people need to watch Southampton. I would not be selling Bukayo Saka this week. If you haven't got Palmer and natural route, and even to be honest, you look afterwards, the following week, Saka goes to Bournemouth. Admittedly, it's not an easy fixture, but it's a better one on paper than Palmer going to Liverpool, isn't it?
Yep.
Just steady people would probably be my advice on that one. I can understand the will and the, oh my God, I've got to get to Palmer. I get that, but I would not be wanting to get rid of Bukayo Saka this week. And against Charlie Taylor. And admittedly, it might be Kyle Walker-Peters instead, but I wouldn't want to be doing that. So Saka's XA 2.2, when also factor in the underperformance of XG from him so far this season. Yeah, a player that I'm quite happy that I own. Kevin De Bruyne is the same XA so far as Saka, and that's no surprise, despite the fact that KDB's obviously missed the last few games. Also will be unavailable this weekend. That's been confirmed by Manchester City. Trent is the only other player with an XA of over 2. And
He's playing really well at the moment.
how far down on this list do you have to go to find another defender, Suj?
Oof.
I've got Suj's eyes going now. I'll give you a clue. It's the bottom name, mate.
Yeah, Robertson.
So Andy Robertson's XA is 1.1 so far this season. Trent 2.1.
Yeah.
Again, it's small sample size, but that's, on average, he's rocking up to what, 0.35 XA per game?
Hmm.
Yes, please. Brian Bumo shows up well here. Obviously, Cole Palmer. I think Yuri Tielemans, a lot of people have highlighted, has been having a really good season for Aston Villa so far. Some good numbers there. Anthony Gordon and Mohamed Salah just behind that. Bruno shows up fairly well here as well. 1.3 XA so far this season. But McNeil is the standout there, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But 5.5, it looks with their fixture run, definitely.
And
Definitely.
segue to kind of evaluate or kind of give emphasis to the crosses as what I'd said so far this season. Dwight McNeil, 47 crosses so far this season, of which only 17 are from corners.
Yeah.
The TI, by the way, if you were wondering, for those looking on YouTube, is throw-ins. I don't quite know why that's thrown in between crosses and corner kicks.
Because look at Leif Davis, chuck it. Well, I suppose there's a difference between taking a throw in
This
and
would
then
include short
launching.
throws.
Exactly. Launching
Obviously,
in the box is completely different.
Ignore that. Fullbacks are obviously going to have a lot of throw-ins here. That's obvious. Andreas Pereira is the only player in the league who has made more crosses than Dwight McNeil this season. 32, which if you look through all the players on this list, that's most corner kicks taken, I think, as well. I think he's on all of them, I think, for Fulham. Whereas if you take, for example, Trent's taken 15, Andy Robertson's taken 24. So that's 39 combined for them, basically. James Maddison also more than 40 crosses this season, which can feel like an unusual one because he's obviously a player that plays quite central, and 26 corners. So that's 16. I was going to say open play crosses, but it obviously includes wide free kicks as well. And he's regularly the one that will cross those into the box. Leif Davis, yes, high. I think many of us have identified there's an Alfie Doughty vibe to him.
Yep.
And Ipswich may also be better than Luton in terms of their defensive numbers this season. But I am keen to see how they get on in forthcoming weeks with this fixture list beginning to ease up for them, although it's still a challenging game for them at West Ham this season. Saka is obviously higher here as well. 31 crosses, 19 from corner kicks. And we can expect that, right? You've got a wide player who is a good 1v1 dribbler, can cross on either foot, clearly strong on his left, and also takes corners. One thing with Saka, particularly, is when he makes like a key pass that's from a cross, it counts like twice for the BPS. Do we understand that?
Yeah.
So it's completed cross to a teammate, and it's also will count as like a key pass at the same time as well. And there's a heavy influence to that, to obviously his really good BPS score from the weekend. It can also fall for someone like Jared Bowen. If you look at Jared Bowen and Saka's numbers here in terms of crosses and corner kicks, they're basically the same.
Similar.
Aren't they?
Yeah. Very similar.
I tell you what isn't though. Jared Bowen, 13 out swinging corners. He's obviously taking them on your left hand side as well, whereas Saka is just taking them exclusively from the right and taking in swingers, or he's taken a couple of chipped ones. Trent, 29 crosses. So it's
surprise.
It's only 15.
He crosses
corners.
from a lot deeper, right? It depends. When you
yes and no.
Where's he crossing from? Sometimes is the question.
Yeah. I mean, Kevin De Bruyne can also fall into that category as well. But then look at KDB's 5 non-corner kick crosses only this season, whereas Trent is at 14.
Which is really when you talked about KDB tactically, positionally being on the wings, but only 5 non-corner crosses. But then City don't really play like that, do they? They find a way through a little bit more intricate.
Yeah, couple of things to flag. Interestingly, I think right at the bottom, Pervis Estupiñán has obviously not played much this season. 24 crosses, of which 10 were from corners as well. I remember all the barcode tippers in pre-season telling us he'd be on corners and stuff as well. Well, yeah, looks like you might have Pervis Estupiñán on some as well. And we know what an attacking threat he can be if he stays in the team now. I think there's 2 here that stand out because they haven't taken a corner yet this season. One is Tyreek Mitchell, and the other is Pedro Porro. So 27 crosses this season looks really good, right? That's more than, say, if you remove Trent's 15 corner kicks, that would put him on what, 14? So
Yep.
Mitchell and Porro is 27 crosses. Porro is near enough completely off of Tottenham set plays now as well. I know people keep saying, is Pedro still worth it? My opinion is yes, he absolutely is, because he's still delivering plenty for the team.
Good, good, good.
And we'll finish with this one, Suj, which is the one I wanted to save for Brennan Johnson. This is penalty area touches. And you can see touches here on this graphic for defensive, midfield, and attacking third, but they're obviously ordered in terms of penalty area touches this season. Brennan Johnson is second.
Tell me more.
Well, I can also tell you that Dejan Kulusevski is sixth.
Anything to do with the fact that you've played Everton and Man United and scored 7 in those games and been dominant?
Yeah, it's also something to say that we played Arsenal and didn't score, right? So
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
in terms of Tottenham's fixtures across the first 6, it's probably kind of middle ranking as a leveler. But I certainly accept that in the Leicester and the Everton games, I mean, the dominance we had even against Leicester and won some, didn't we have over 10 corners in the first 25 minutes or something silly? So, those sort of things are going to have an impact. But Johnson to have the second most penalty area touches is quite telling. I tell you why it's quite telling, I think, when I saw it, I was surprised. A player always used to show up really highly for penalty area touches was Raheem Sterling.
Mm-hmm.
We used to joke about him, he'd take too many touches, right? He'd drive at someone in the box and then he'd do his little jinky stuff. Well, Johnson's nothing like that. No. As a player, is he? He's just about arriving in the moment. In fact, a lot of the stuff that he does in the penalty area is one-touch stuff. So I think that's quite telling and interesting. And every time a little bit of data pops up on him, he does attract my attention a little bit more. I'm probably in a position now, I think. I'm not fussed to keep or sell Jota this week, but if after tomorrow night with Liverpool's Champions League game, I think I've got to sell him, I probably do go Johnson now.
Excuse me. In the top 11, James, you've got three Arsenal players, Saka, Martinelli, Havertz, completely understandable. You've got 4 Man City players.
Well, I'd say just jump in. Martinelli's quite telling, right? Because he hasn't had the minutes of the others.
Yeah. But Haaland, Silva, Grealish, Savio. And then you've got one in Liverpool in Salah. No one else from Liverpool. Not even the likes of Diogo Jota or Luis Diaz are getting into the top 10 or 11 here. And then Mitoma. It's really concentrated amongst yourselves, being Spurs, Arsenal, City, as the most penalty area touches.
Well, Jota's not on this list, is he?
Not even. You have to scroll.
And
he's not
for the
there.
benefit of those on the audio, the bottom person we've got on this table we're showing you is Dominic Solanke on 26. Mo Salah's had 57.
Jota missed 1 game. It's not enough to...
No, of course not.
To skew the figures that much, no.
Of course not. So he's having 5 or less penalty area touches per game.
Thomas Souček, mate, 28. But this is really interesting. You've got Jared Bowen, Thomas Souček, Mohamed Kudus, all on this list. We haven't scored a goal for shit, no open play goals at all. That's ridiculous to see that.
A really big name that's missing off this list as well. It's Watkins.
I thought you were about to say Cole Palmer, but he does a lot of his work outside the box.
Yes.
So, yeah, you're right. When we're talking about number 9s, Cole Palmer, Ollie Watkins, for sure.
But Morgan Rogers does appear on this list.
He does.
Now, Rogers also has played more minutes than Watkins, but it's quite interesting. I think Rogers has shown himself to be a really, really good asset at that price. He's still getting the investment he obviously will do after the goal at the weekend as well. Yes, their fixtures are about to get a little bit tougher and then significantly more tougher. But I think at his value, that's still a great option, isn't it?
Yeah, no doubt.
In terms of
Agreed.
people at his price that also appear on this list, what are you looking at? Diallo, not safe on minutes. Souček, not safe on minutes.
There is nothing there at 5 million, James.
No, but then also we couldn't expect someone like Tyler Dibbling to be on this list yet, having only started half the games. If
you had a bit of money, maybe Minter as a little bit more expensive. But
also doesn't feel safe, does it?
No, not at all. Not at all.
No. Should we read anything off that? The likes of Watkins and Jota as kind of nines for two of the best teams in this league don't appear on this list. I mean, Isak, I know he's not started the last game, but that's another one, isn't it? It's one game short. It's probably, in terms of minutes, it's probably equivalent to Watkins this season, I guess. We've not seen Isak on any of these tables, have we?
No, no, you're right. Definitely, yeah. I don't read as much into Watkins because he has returned from a fantasy point of view. Jota's probably been a little bit of a disappointment. He's not been awful, but he's been not up to where we would have hoped from a fantasy point of view. Isak's been nowhere near.
Haaland is third, for those who were interested. 46 penalty area touch. I mean, Bernardo Silva's a really surprising one, isn't it?
I think the percentage is interesting. He's 46 from 79 attacking third.
But I also that's one I also think he's ended up playing on the right late on against Arsenal. How many times has he dribbled into the box and had those little touches like on the side of the penalty area, which isn't actually impacting or threatening? Whereas Johnson's ones, you like I said, he's not someone who's going to take constant touches. I don't think that one I saw this morning really stood out to me on Brennan Johnson.
Yep. Cool, James. That was a really interesting dive down into some stats that might set people up for their game week 7 transfers before the international break. If you enjoyed it, do give it a thumbs up and a like. If there are any stats from there that you have picked up and think are interesting, why not jump in the comments on YouTube and let us know. It'd be interesting to have a look and see what catches your eye as well. Other than that, make sure you're subscribed wherever you're listening to the show. What's coming up, James?
Clayton James show tomorrow. We'll obviously talk more about Bournemouth and Southampton from last night. It's certainly one of the top. Have you seen the Russell Martin interview?
No.
After? You've got to see it.
Okay, this is my first thing to do when we finish the show.
It was quite scathing. Then he's in praising, but the quote is just going to get taken in terms of the scathing that I don't recognise my team.
Wow.
I mean, you could tell he was really upset and actually defended himself. He said, "No, I was upset at half time. I'm not upset now." It's an interview that you should watch. It's really interesting.
Cool. Listeners, thank you so much for your support. Patreon.com/PlanetFPL. You may have heard the blurb from us before, so I'm going to save it from you today. But Patreon's where you can come and support the show, keep the lights on, and get all of the other perks and benefits, including the Champions League fantasy show later on today.
Already
Stay
out,
safe.
boss.
It's already out if you're on Patreon. There you go. Stay safe. Look after yourselves. Chat for now.
Thanks, everyone. Be nice to each other. Cue music, please. Man child.